Nina Reeves wiped down table 7 for the third time that evening. The cloth moved in small circles across the black glass surface, removing invisible specks that only she seemed to notice. Around her, the Crimson Spire restaurant buzzed with low conversation and the soft clink of crystal against metal. This was where the galaxy's most powerful beings came to make deals that would reshape worlds. She was just here to serve drinks. The restaurant occupied the top floor of Station Meridian, a neutral meeting ground floating in unclaimed space. Through the tall windows, stars scattered across the darkness like spilled salt. Nina had worked here for 8 months now, ever since her money ran out and she had to leave medical school. The pay was decent. The customers rarely looked at her face. 3 large figures entered through the main doors. Nina straightened automatically, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. The Fireborn had arrived, dragons. That was what humans called them, though the word felt too small. Sovereign Draish moved through the restaurant like fire-given form. His scales shifted between deep red and burnished gold, each one the size of Nina's palm. He stood twice as tall as any human, with powerful legs that ended in claws capable of crushing steel. Wings lay folded against his back, too large for the space but held with perfect control. His head was angular and proud, with eyes that burned like molten copper. Behind him came High Arbiter Quillen and 3 other Fireborn advisors. They moved to their usual table near the center of the room, where everyone could see them. Where they could see everyone, Nina approached with water glasses on a tray. Her hands stayed steady through practice. The first time she had served dragons, her fingers had trembled so badly she nearly dropped everything. Now she knew the trick. Don't think of them as predators who could tear you apart without effort. Think of them as customers who tip poorly and never say thank you. Welcome back, Sovereign Draish. She placed glasses around the table, her eyes on her work. The kitchen has prepared the fire-spiced meat you requested. Draish did not respond. He never did. To him, she was probably no different than the table or the chair. Just another piece of furniture in the background. But Nina had learned to see things in the background. Medical school had taught her that. Watch for the small signs, the things that don't fit, the patterns that other people miss. Tonight, as she served the first course, she noticed something odd. Draish moved his food around the plate with one claw, cutting it into smaller pieces. But he barely ate any of it. She had seen him do this before 3 weeks ago at the last negotiation dinner, and the time before that. Dragons were famous for their appetites. They needed enormous amounts of fuel for their massive bodies. A dragon who didn't eat was like a star that didn't shine. Wrong. Unnatural. Nina stepped back to her position by the wall. From there she could watch the whole room. Ambassador Roth, the human diplomatic representative, sat at a nearby table with several other species delegates. He was laughing too loudly at something, his round face red with wine. He had barely glanced at Nina when she served his table earlier. She was used to that too. The peace negotiations had been going on for 3 months. The Fireborn Accord wanted to establish trade routes through territory claimed by 3 other species. It was delicate work, the kind that required patience and careful words. One wrong move and there would be war instead of peace. High Arbiter Quillen spoke quietly to Draish, his voice too low for Nina to hear. She watched as he poured tea into Draish's cup from a silver pot, performing what looked like a ceremony. The other Fireborn watched with approval. Quillen's scales were darker than Draish's, almost black with veins of deep blue. He was younger, perhaps only 300 cycles old compared to Draish's 800. Draish lifted the cup and drank. Nina saw his primary claw shake just slightly before he set it down. The tremor lasted less than a second. No one else seemed to notice. She frowned, her mind pulling up half-remembered lessons from anatomy class. Neurological symptoms. Muscle weakness. Loss of appetite. They formed a pattern, but she couldn't quite see the full picture yet. The dinner continued for 2 more hours. Nina served and cleared plates, refilled glasses, smiled politely at the few customers who acknowledged her existence. All the while, she kept part of her attention on table center. On Draish. He participated in the conversation but seemed tired. His inner eyelid flickered closed several times. A transparent membrane that dragons use to protect their eyes in combat or when they slept. But he was doing it while awake, while talking. Like someone fighting to stay alert. When the Fireborn finally left for the evening, Nina began cleaning their table. She found Draish's plate still half full. The meat had been cut into tiny pieces but barely touched. She stood there for a moment, staring at it, her instincts screaming that something was deeply wrong. "Nina, stop daydreaming and clear that table." The manager's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. She stacked the plates quickly and carried them to the kitchen, but her mind kept working on the problem. She had learned in her medical training that the human brain was exceptional at pattern recognition. Humans had evolved to spot predators hiding in tall grass, to notice when fruit was poisoned, to see danger that others missed. It was how her ancestors survived on Earth, a world so dangerous that other species called it a death planet. Maybe that was why she saw what the dragons did not. They were apex predators, the top of every food chain they encountered. They had no natural enemies. They never had to watch for threats because nothing threatened them. But Nina came from a world where everything was a threat, where paying attention meant staying alive. She thought about Dracia's trembling claw, his untouched food, his flickering eyelid. She thought about how it had been getting worse over the past few weeks. And she thought about High Arbiter Quillen, always so attentive, always pouring that ceremonial tea. The pieces started to fit together in her mind, forming a picture she didn't want to see. Something was very wrong with Sovereign Drache, and if she was right about what she suspected, then everyone in this restaurant, everyone on this station, everyone in 4 different star systems was in danger. The question was whether anyone would listen to a human waitress who couldn't even afford to finish medical school. Nina's apartment was barely large enough for a bed and a small desk. She sat on the floor with her old tablet, scrolling through medical databases while her shift uniform hung drying in the tiny bathroom. Outside her single window, Station Meridian's artificial night cycle had dimmed the corridors to a soft blue glow. She had been researching for 3 hours. Her eyes hurt and her back ached, but she kept reading. Fireborne biology was fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. Their bodies were built like living fortresses. They had 2 hearts, 3 lungs, and a skeletal structure reinforced with metallic compounds that made their bones nearly unbreakable. Their scales could deflect most weapons. Their blood contained cells that attacked toxins and diseases so aggressively that infections simply couldn't take hold. Evolution had made them almost indestructible. Almost, Nina found a section about their nervous system and leaned closer to the screen. The Fireborn had a central nerve cluster located deep in their chest, protected by layers of bone and muscle. This cluster controlled all their major functions. It was their one critical vulnerability, the single point of failure in an otherwise perfect biological machine. But damaging it from the outside was nearly impossible. You would need to pierce through their scales, break through their ribs, and somehow avoid their redundant organs. No weapon could do that reliably. No disease could reach it through their powerful immune system. She sat back, rubbing her tired eyes. If someone wanted to harm a dragon, they would need something that could slip past all those defenses. Something the dragon's body wouldn't recognize as a threat until it was too late. Her tablet chimed with a new search result. Nina opened it and felt her breath catch. Shadow bloom, a plant native to the Fireborn homeworld, extinct for over 2 centuries. The article described how it had been used in the ancient dynastic wars, back when different dragon clans fought for supremacy. Assassins would extract oil from the plant and add it to their target's food in tiny amounts over many months. The poison worked slowly, attacking the central nerve cluster in doses small enough that the dragon's immune system ignored it. Like water wearing away stone, each dose did a little more damage. Eventually, the victim would experience tremors, loss of appetite, and fatigue. Then paralysis. Then death. The galaxy believed Shadow Bloom was gone, wiped out deliberately after the Fireborn unified under a single government. No dragon would ever face that particular death again, unless someone had kept seeds, or found a hidden grove, or preserved samples for exactly this purpose. Nina checked the time. Her next shift started in 5 hours. She should sleep. Instead, she pulled up the restaurant's security footage archives. Staff weren't supposed to access these, but she had learned the password months ago by watching her manager type it in. The system only kept recordings for 30 days before deleting them. She searched backward through 3 months of Fireborn visits looking for their first negotiation dinner. There. Nina watched High Arbiter Quillen arrive with Sovereign Drache. The recording showed them sitting, ordering, eating. Everything normal. Quillen did not perform any tea ceremony that night. She moved forward to the second dinner 2 weeks later. This time, Quillen brought a silver teapot and cups. He poured for Draish with careful ceremonial movements. The other Fireborn watched with approval. It looked like a sign of respect, an old tradition being honored. Nina zoomed in on Quillen's hands. For just a moment, so brief she almost missed it, he pulled something from inside his robe, a small vial. He opened it and added a single drop to the teapot before pouring. She rewound and watched again. Then again. The movement was practiced, smooth. This was not the first time he had done this. Nina sat very still, her heart pounding. She had found it. Proof that High Arbiter Quillen was poisoning Sovereign Draish. But why? Quillen was second in command of the Fireborn Accord. He had power, respect, and honor. What could he possibly gain from killing his own leader? She spent another hour searching through news archives and diplomatic records. The peace negotiations were controversial among some Fireborn. A faction believed that dragons should expand through conquest, not trade agreements. They thought Draish had grown soft in his old age, too willing to compromise with weaker species. If Draish died during these negotiations, especially if it looked natural, Quillen would become the new sovereign. He could then break the peace talks and pursue a more aggressive policy. War instead of cooperation, conquest instead of trade. Thousands, maybe millions would die, and it would start with one old dragon drinking poisoned tea. Nina saved copies of everything she had found. The medical research, the security footage, the political analysis. She put it all on a data chip and hid it in her jacket pocket. Tomorrow she would show this to someone, station security maybe, or Ambassador Roth, someone in authority who could stop what was happening. She finally lay down on her bed, but sleep came slowly. Her mind kept spinning through scenarios. What if no one believed her? What if they thought she was making it up for attention? She was just a waitress and Quillen was the second most powerful dragon in the galaxy. But she thought about Draish's trembling claw, his untouched food, the way he fought to keep his eyes open. He was dying slowly, poisoned by someone he trusted, and no one else had noticed. Nina had grown up on Earth, where poisonous plants could kill you, where predators stalked in darkness, where a moment of inattention meant death. Humans learned to see dangers that others missed. They had to, or they wouldn't survive. That skill had seemed useless in medical school, where everything was controlled and safe. But here, now it might be the only thing standing between peace and war. She touched the data chip in her jacket pocket like a talisman. Tomorrow someone would listen. They had to, because the next negotiation dinner was scheduled in 2 days, and Nina suspected that would be when Quillen made his final move. Station security had a desk near the main commerce level, tucked between a shop selling crystallized minerals and a repair stand for personal data devices. Nina stood in front of it, data chip clutched in her sweating palm, while the security officer scrolled through his screen. Without looking up, "I need to report a crime," she said for the second time. "File a formal complaint." Through the terminal. The officer was a Kelzan, his gray skin marked with service tattoos. He still had not looked at her. "Someone is being poisoned, Sovereign Draish of the Fireborn Accord." That got his attention. He finally raised his eyes to her face, and Nina saw amusement there. "Not concern?" "Amusement? You're saying someone is poisoning a dragon?" "Yes. High Arbiter Quillen has been adding Shadow Bloom extract to his tea over the past 3 months. I have security footage and medical research that shows Shadow Bloom is extinct," the officer interrupted. "And even if it wasn't, dragons are biologically immune to almost every toxin in the known galaxy. Their bodies break down poisons before they can cause harm. Not this one. It works slowly, in small doses that bypass their immune response. If you just look at the footage, Miss, I don't know what you're trying to accomplish here, but making false accusations against a diplomatic official is a serious offense." The officer's voice had gone cold. "High Arbiter Quillen has an impeccable record. Sovereign Draish is probably the most well-protected individual on this station. And you're a—" He paused, checking his screen. "A waitress at the Crimson Spire, with a previous charge for theft from your college dorm." Nina felt her face burn. That was a misunderstanding. "My roommate borrowed my— I think you should go back to work and leave security matters to professionals." The officer turned back to his screen, dismissing her. Nina walked away with the data chip still in her hand. The theft charge had been dropped after 2 weeks when her roommate admitted the truth, but it was still on her record. Just another mark against her credibility. She tried Ambassador Roth next, catching him in the corridor outside his office. The human diplomat had been laughing with an aide, but his smile vanished when he saw Nina approaching. Ambassador Roth, I need 1 minute of your time. It's about Sovereign Draish, Miss Reeves, isn't it? From the restaurant. He looked uncomfortable, like she had violated some unspoken rule by speaking to him outside of work. I'm very busy right now. Please. I have evidence that High Arbiter Quillen is poisoning Sovereign Draish. If someone doesn't act soon, he's going to die, and these peace negotiations will collapse. Roth exchanged a glance with his aide, who looked embarrassed on Nina's behalf. That's a very serious accusation. And quite frankly, an absurd one. Quillen has served the Fireborn Accord with distinction for centuries. What possible evidence could you have? Nina held out the data chip. Security footage showing Quillen adding something to Draish's tea. Medical research about Shadow Bloom poison. Timeline correlation between the tea ceremony and Draish's declining health. If you would just review... Young lady, I appreciate your enthusiasm. Roth's voice dripped with condescension. But you're a waitress, not a medical expert or security analyst. You're clearly out of your depth here. Sovereign Draish is surrounded by advisors, bodyguards, and the best medical care in the galaxy. Don't you think they would notice if something was wrong? But I've been watching him for months. The symptoms are... I don't have time for conspiracy theories from service staff. Roth turned away. Focus on your job and let qualified people handle diplomatic security. Nina stood alone in the corridor, hands shaking with frustration. No one would listen. To them, she was nobody. Just a failed medical student serving drinks to her betters. She went to her apartment and sat on the floor staring at the data chip. Tomorrow was the final negotiation dinner. The grand ceremony where all 4 species would sign the peace accord. Hundreds of dignitaries would attend. Security would be intense. It would also be the perfect time for Quillen to make his move. Draish would collapse during the ceremony, seemingly from natural causes. An 800-year-old dragon finally succumbing to age. Tragic but not suspicious. Quillen would assume leadership immediately, and with tensions already high, he could easily blame Draish's death on the other species. Accuse them of treachery. Start the war he wanted. Nina knew all of this, and she couldn't make anyone believe her. Her neighbor, Bernard Gray, knocked on her door that evening. He was an old human who had worked on the station for 40 years, doing maintenance and repairs. He sometimes shared meals with Nina, both of them too poor for the expensive restaurants they worked near. You look troubled, he said, settling into her only chair with a groan. Nina told him everything. The poison, the research, her failed attempts to warn people. Bernard listened quietly, his weathered face showing no surprise. People in power don't like being told they're wrong, he said finally, especially not by people they consider beneath them. I've seen it before. Someone notices something important, tries to speak up, gets ignored. Sometimes they disappear, so I should just stay quiet? Let it happen? I'm saying you should be careful. Bernard stood slowly, his joints creaking. Those who see too much tend to have accidents. Think about that before you do anything foolish tomorrow. After he left, Nina lay awake thinking. Bernard was probably right. If she pushed this further, she might end up arrested or worse. She had no proof anyone would accept, no credentials that gave her voice weight, no authority to challenge powerful figures. She was nobody, invisible, overlooked. But maybe that was an advantage. Dragons were apex predators who had never learned to watch for threats. They couldn't imagine a danger small enough to slip past their defenses. They had forgotten that the most dangerous poisons came in tiny doses, that the deadliest predators struck from the shadows. Humans remembered. Humans from Earth, where everything could kill you, where survival meant noticing what others missed. Tomorrow, Nina would be at that ceremony, serving drinks in the background. Invisible as always, and when the moment came, she would make a choice. Stay safe in the shadows or step into the light and speak a truth no one wanted to hear. She fell asleep with the data chip under her pillow, her decision already made. The Grand Hall of Station Meridian had been transformed overnight. Banners representing 4 different species hung from the high ceiling, their colors bright against the dark walls. Security officers stood at every entrance, checking credentials and scanning for weapons. At the center of the room, a ceremonial table held the peace accord, waiting for signatures that would reshape the galaxy's political landscape. Nina moved through the crowd with a tray of glasses, her white uniform marking her as staff and therefore invisible. She had arrived early, helping set up before the dignitaries began filing in. Now the room was nearly full. Representatives from dozens of worlds stood in small groups, talking in low voices about trade routes and mineral rights and the future. No one looked at her as she passed. Sovereign Draish entered through the main doors, and the room fell silent. He moved more slowly than Nina remembered from months ago, his massive body carefully controlled. His scales had lost some of their luster, but he held his head high, projecting strength and authority that made others instinctively step back. High Arbiter Quillen walked beside him, attentive and proper. Two other Fireborn guards flanked them. They moved to the head table, where seats had been specially reinforced to hold their weight. Nina's heart pounded as she watched Quillen produce the silver teapot and cups. The ceremony would happen soon, then the signing, then Draish would collapse and everything would fall apart. She had the data chip in her pocket. Her hand stayed steady as she served drinks to various tables, working her way closer to the Fireborn delegation. Ambassador Roth sat nearby with other human representatives, looking pleased with himself. He had brokered much of this peace deal. It would make his career. Quillen began the tea ceremony, his movements slow and reverent. The room watched with approval. This was tradition, respect, honor between leader and advisor. Nina saw his hand slip inside his robe, reaching for the vial. She didn't think. Thinking would mean hesitating, and hesitation would mean Draish would drink that tea and die. Nina stepped forward and deliberately knocked her tray against a server stand. Glasses crashed to the floor, shattering with sounds like small explosions. The entire room turned to look. Security officers moved toward the disturbance. In the sudden silence, Nina walked directly to Sovereign Draish's table. Every protocol in the book said she should not approach. Every rule of station diplomacy said service staff did not address dignitaries directly. Every survival instinct screamed at her to run. She stopped beside Draish and looked up at his massive form. His copper eyes focused on her, confused by her presence. "Sovereign Draish," Nina said, her voice carrying in the quiet room. "With respect, I believe High Arbiter Quillen is poisoning you with Shadow Bloom extract." The silence became absolute. Nina felt hundreds of eyes on her, but she kept her gaze on Draish. Quillen's expression twisted with rage. "How dare you? Guards, remove this human immediately. I've been watching you for 3 months." Nina continued quickly before security could reach her. "Your appetite decreased. You developed tremors in your primary claws. Your inner eyelid flickers when you're tired. These are all symptoms of Shadow Bloom poisoning, administered in small doses over time." "This is absurd," Quillen's voice boomed. "Shadow Bloom is extinct and dragons are immune to poisons." Ambassador Roth stood, his face red. "I am so sorry, Sovereign Draish. This employee has been making wild accusations. She will be removed and punished immediately." But Draish held up one massive claw, stopping everyone. His eyes had not left Nina's face. Something had changed in them, a predator's instinct, awakening after long sleep. "Continue," he said softly. Nina pulled out the data chip. "I have security footage showing High Arbiter Quillen adding something to your tea from a concealed vial. I have medical research explaining how Shadow Bloom works. I have a timeline correlating the start of these tea ceremonies with your declining health. She's a failed medical student with a theft record," Quillen snarled. "She's seeking attention by making false accusations against respected officials." "Then let's test the tea," Nina said, meeting Quillen's furious gaze. "Analyze it right now. If I'm wrong, I'll accept any punishment. But if I'm right, then everyone in this room is in danger because Quillen plans to blame your death on the other species and start a war." Draish reached for the teacup. Quillen moved to stop him, but Draish's other claw shot out, catching Quillen's wrist with crushing force. "You would prevent me from investigating?" Draish's voice was soft, dangerous. "Why? My sovereign, this is an insult to our entire species. We cannot let a human service worker—" "I asked why you would prevent the investigation." Draish's claws tightened. "If the tea is pure, the analysis will prove her wrong. Unless you know it isn't pure." Quillen's eyes darted around the room, calculating. He could see his plan collapsing. Nina saw the moment he decided to end this his own way. For the future of the Fireborn. Quillen roared. He twisted in Draish's weakened grip and lunged forward. Claws extended toward the Sovereign's chest, toward the nerve cluster that would end his life instantly. Nina didn't remember deciding to move. One moment she was standing beside the table. The next she was throwing herself between Quillen and Draish. She felt the impact of Quillen's tail sweeping her aside, felt ribs crack, felt the air driven from her lungs. Then she was on the floor, staring up at the ceiling while chaos erupted around her. Security officers swarmed forward. Dracia's guards tackled Quillen, forcing him down despite his struggling. Someone screamed for medical assistance. Nina tried to breathe, but her chest felt wrong, like something had broken inside. Blood filled her mouth. She could hear Dracia's voice above her, saying something she couldn't quite understand. Her vision started to narrow, darkness creeping in from the edges. The last thing she saw was Dracia's massive form leaning over her, his copper eyes wide with something that looked like shock. She had been right about the poison. She hoped someone would remember that afterward. Then the darkness swallowed her, and Nina knew nothing more. Pain pulled Nina back to consciousness in fragments. First came awareness of her body, each breath sending sharp agony through her chest, then sound, voices speaking in rapid tones above her, then light, too bright even through closed eyelids. She tried to move and immediately regretted it. Something was very wrong with her ribs, with her lungs, with everything. She's waking. An unfamiliar voice, clinical and precise, heart rate increasing, blood pressure unstable. Can you save her? That was Drache. Nina recognized his deep rumble even through the fog of pain. I don't know. Human physiology is not my specialty. Their bodies are fragile compared to most species. And she has significant internal injuries. We've stopped the bleeding, but there may be damage we cannot see. Nina managed to open her eyes. She was in a medical bay, surrounded by equipment she didn't recognize. A Kelsen doctor stood beside her bed, manipulating a holographic display. Beyond him, Sovereign Drache filled most of the room, his massive form hunched to fit under the ceiling. Nina Reeves. Drache moved closer, his copper eyes studying her face. You are awake, did you? Nina's voice came out as a rasp. Test the tea? Yes, it contained shadow bloom extract, exactly as you claimed. Quillen has been arrested along with 17 co-conspirators. They plan to use my death to start a war. Drache's expression was hard to read, but Nina thought she saw shame there. You were correct about everything, and we dismissed you as irrelevant. Story of my life. Nina tried to smile, but it hurt too much. The doctor moved between them. She needs rest. Her condition is still critical. How critical? Drache asked. Without a human medical specialist, I give her less than 40% chance of survival. We've requested one from the nearest human colony, but they are 8 hours away. She may not have 8 hours. Nina closed her eyes, too tired to feel afraid. She had done what she came to do. Drache knew the truth. The peace accord would be signed. That was enough. No. Drache's voice carried absolute authority. This is not acceptable. Nina Reeves saved my life. She saw what none of my advisors, my guards, my own people could see. She spoke truth when everyone else chose silence. I owe her a life debt, and I will not let it go unpaid. Sovereign, I understand your feelings, but I cannot perform miracles. Human biology is too different from, then bring me someone who understands it. Use every resource of the Fireborn Accord. Contact every human medical facility in range. Offer whatever payment is necessary. Drache's claws scraped against the floor. She gave everything to save me. I will not allow her to die for it. Nina drifted back into unconsciousness, Drache's words following her down into darkness. Time became strange. She woke and slept in irregular patterns, never quite sure which state she was in. Sometimes she heard voices. Drache arguing with doctors. Ambassador Roth, his tone ashamed, apologizing for not listening. Bernard Gray, her old neighbor, telling her to hold on. At one point she surfaced to find a different doctor beside her bed, this one human. The woman's hands moved quickly over instruments, her face tight with concentration. Collapsed lung, 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding in the abdominal cavity. The doctor muttered. What hit her? A fireborn's tail strike, someone answered. She's lucky to be alive at all. Lucky, the doctor repeated without humor. Let's see if we can keep her that way. Nina slipped away again, the voices fading to background noise. When she finally woke with a clear head, the pain had reduced to a dull ache. She was alone in the medical bay except for monitoring equipment that beeped softly. Her chest was wrapped in bandages that glowed faintly blue, some kind of advanced healing technology. The door opened and Drache entered, moving carefully in the small space. He settled beside her bed, folding his wings tight against his back. You look better, he said. I feel like I got hit by a shuttle. Nina's voice was weak but functional. How long? 5 days. You've been unconscious for most of it. The human specialist said you'll recover, though it will take time. 5 days. Nina processed that. The peace accord was signed yesterday with full ceremony. All 4 species committed to the agreement. Draish paused. We also signed a provision that establishes oversight committees, including input from all station personnel, regardless of rank or position. Your warning might have been heard sooner if we had valued the observations of those we considered beneath our notice. Nina managed a small laugh, which hurt. So some good came from all this. More than you know. Quillen's conspiracy ran deep. He had support from hardline factions who wanted war, not peace. They believed conquest would serve the Fireborn better than cooperation. If he had succeeded, thousands would have died in the first month alone. Draish's claws flexed. You prevented that. One human who refused to stay silent. I'm not a hero, Nina said quietly. I just noticed things. That's what humans do. We evolved on a world where not paying attention meant death. We see patterns, track small changes, spot predators hiding in shadows. It's survival instinct, not courage. Perhaps. But it took courage to speak that truth to power. You knew no one would listen, yet you spoke anyway. Draish touched one claw gently to her hand, careful not to hurt her. Among my people, saving someone's life creates a debt that can never be fully repaid. You have given me my life, my people's peace, and our future. What can I offer that would balance such a gift? Nothing. Nina met his eyes. I don't want payment. I just want to go back to medical school and finish what I started. Then that is what you shall have. Draish's voice was firm. And more if you will accept it. But Nina had already drifted back to sleep, exhausted by even that brief conversation. Draish remained beside her bed, watching over her like she had once watched over him, protecting someone who had protected him first. Nina stood in the medical school lecture hall, tablet in hand, reviewing notes before class started. 6 weeks had passed since the attack, and her ribs still ached when the weather changed. But the doctors said she was healing well. Students filtered in around her, most ignoring her presence. She was used to that. Her tablet chimed with a message. Nina glanced at the screen and felt a smile cross her face. How are your studies progressing? Draish had written. I trust the scholarship is covering all necessary expenses? More than enough, Nina typed back. Thank you again. I still can't believe you created an entire fund just for human medical students. It seemed appropriate. If more humans study interspecies medicine, perhaps they will notice what others miss as you did. The professor called the class to attention, and Nina tucked away her tablet. The Reeves Scholarship, as it was officially named, had paid for everything. Her tuition, her housing, her books, even a small stipend for living expenses. She would never have to work as a waitress again, never have to drop out because money ran dry. But more than that, the scholarship came with something she had never expected. Respect. Everyone on Station Meridian knew the story now. The human waitress who had exposed a conspiracy and saved the dragon leader's life. News services across the galaxy had covered it. Nina Reeves was no longer invisible. She found she didn't entirely like the attention. People stared at her now, whispered when she passed. Some called her a hero. Others said she had gotten lucky. A few claimed she must have been working with Draish's intelligence services all along, that no simple waitress could have uncovered such a plot. Nina knew the truth. She had just paid attention when everyone else looked away. After class, she stopped by the administration building to check her messages. There was another one from Draish sent an hour earlier. I have a proposal for you when you finish your studies. The Fireborn Accord wishes to establish an advisory position for human-related matters. Someone who can provide perspective we lack. Someone who sees patterns we miss. The position would be yours if you want it. Nina stared at the message for a long time. Working directly for the Fireborn Accord would be an incredible honor. The kind of position that people spent lifetimes trying to achieve. She would have influence, authority. The ear of one of the galaxy's most powerful leaders. She typed a response slowly. I'm honored by the offer. Can I think about it? Of course. There is no rush. The galaxy will still need observers when you are ready. Nina put away her tablet and walked across campus toward her next class. Students passed her in both directions, humans and aliens mixing freely. This was what the peace accord had made possible. Cooperation instead of conflict. Understanding instead of war. She thought about Quillen, sitting in a Fireborn prison somewhere, his conspiracy shattered. He had believed that dragons should rule through strength and fear. That compromise was weakness. That working with other species diminished the fireborn rather than elevating everyone together. He had been wrong. But more importantly, he had been blind. Blind to the weakness growing in his own leader. Blind to the patterns that would have revealed his plot. Blind to the possibility that a human waitress might see what he thought was perfectly hidden. That blindness had destroyed him. Nina's path took her past the campus gardens, where students studied on benches beneath alien trees. She spotted Ambassador Roth sitting alone, reading something on his tablet. He looked up as she approached, and guilt crossed his face. "Miss Reeves, Nina." He stood awkwardly. "I've been hoping to speak with you." "Ambassador." Nina kept her voice neutral. "I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually." Roth set down his tablet. "I dismissed your concerns, insulted your credentials, and treated you as less than you are. I was wrong. Profoundly wrong. If I had listened, you wouldn't have been forced to put yourself in danger." Nina studied him for a moment. He looked older than she remembered, with new lines around his eyes. The successful peace negotiation had advanced his career, but everyone knew the truth. A waitress had saved the accord, not the diplomat. "You're right. You should have listened." Nina met his eyes. "But you're not the only one who ignored me. The whole system is built to dismiss people like me. Service workers, students, anyone without authority or credentials. We're treated as invisible until we do something dramatic enough to force people to see us." Roth nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I'd like to change it if I can. I'm working on new protocols for diplomatic security. They include provisions for listening to warnings from any source, regardless of the speaker's position or status." He paused. "I was hoping you might review them. Your perspective would be valuable." Nina considered refusing, but then she thought about other people like her, trying to speak up about things they noticed being dismissed because they didn't have the right title or credentials. "Send them to me," she said. "I'll look them over." Relief flooded Roth's face. "Thank you. And Nina, I've also written a recommendation for you, for after you finish school. Any position you apply for, any program you want to join, you'll have my full support." They parted ways, and Nina continued to her next class. Medical ethics, taught by a professor who started each lecture with real cases and asked students what they would do. Today, they discussed a scenario about conflicting medical advice from different species doctors. Nina found she had opinions on that topic, strong ones based on experience. As she walked home that evening, she passed the Crimson Spire restaurant. Through the tall windows, she could see servers moving between tables, invisible to the important people they served. She wondered if any of them were paying attention to things others missed. If any of them would speak up if they saw something wrong. She hoped they would. The galaxy needed people who noticed patterns, who refused to stay silent, who spoke truth even when no one wanted to hear it. Her tablet chimed again. This time it was Bernard Gray, her old neighbor. "Saw you on the news again. They're calling you the Guardian of Station Meridian. How's it feel to be famous?" Nina smiled and typed back. "Weird. I just want to finish school and help people." "That's what makes you different," Bernard replied. "You never wanted glory. You just wanted to do what was right." Nina thought about that as she entered her apartment. Much nicer now than her old tiny room. She had been nobody. Invisible. Overlooked. A failed medical student serving drinks to people who never learned her name. But she had seen what the dragons missed, had spoken when silence was safer, had put herself between danger and someone who needed protecting. Earth had taught humans to be survivors. To watch for threats in the grass, poison in the cup, predators in shadows. Those skills had seemed useless in the modern galaxy, where technology and power were what mattered. But Nina had learned that the old skills still had value. That paying attention, noticing patterns, refusing to ignore what was right in front of you, these were not weaknesses. They were humanity's greatest strength. She sat at her desk and opened her medical textbook, ready to study. Somewhere in the galaxy, Sovereign Draish was recovering from poison, learning to trust the observations of those he had once overlooked. Ambassador Roth was changing diplomatic protocols to value every voice, not just the powerful ones. And Nina Reeves, former waitress and future doctor, was exactly where she needed to be. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers that hid in plain sight. But it also had observers now, People who refused to look away, and that made all the difference.